Welcome to the SoccerWire podcast, the weekly news show that focuses on youth soccer and player development in the United States. I'm Marc Serber, and today we'll tell you about the top stories going up on SoccerWire.com. We'll catch Charles Boehm by Skype as he's in Toronto before heading to Seattle to cover MLS Cup. Bridget Baker will get us up to date on the latest college recruiting. And after a week without our fearless leader, Chris Hummer returns to tell us what he's heard on the wire. All this, plus a roundtable discussion on U.S. Youth Soccer State Cups. It's November 6, 2019, and the SoccerWire podcast is ready for kickoff. It's great to be back with you for the SoccerWire podcast, episode 6. And I can't believe that I'm still here, let alone we're all still here. But we'll start with our normal kickoff play as I will pass the mic off to Quinn Casteel, SoccerWire's managing editor. Quinn, first of all, before we get into it, please do not just lump the ball into the corner and have everybody run downfield. But what has you preoccupied this week?
Well, speaking of poor offensive tactics, Mark, the U.S. U17 men's national team crashed out of the FIFA U17 World Cup this past weekend in really embarrassing fashion, to be honest. And it wasn't just the fact that the U.S. didn't advance out of the group. It certainly would have been nice considering that up to 3 teams advance out of the 4-team groups. But the U.S. finished dead last in Group D, only got one result. They got a draw against Japan, and other than that, they were completely dominated. Scored one total goal in the 3 group games. They actually scored their only goal of the entire tournament 3 minutes into their first game against Senegal, a game that they lost 4-1. Then they went the final 267 minutes without scoring again. They only mustered 10 total shots on goal over the course of their 3 games. And, a team that we thought would actually have some offensive firepower with Griffin Yao, who's with DC United, and Gio Reyna, who really shined at the CONCACAF Championship in May, where they earned qualification for the World Cup. It was just a really embarrassing, totally anemic performance at the World Cup under head coach Raphael Wicki in his debut at the World Cup.
And you wrote a piece about this on SoccerWire explaining exactly how bad of a performance it was from a statistics standpoint. Can you shed light or give readers a tease of what they can find when they go to SoccerWire.com?
Sure. Obviously, I covered a lot of it there with 267 minutes straight without a goal after scoring their only goal of the tournament. But also, over the course of the 3 games, they had only 10 total shots on goal. They only got 14 corner kicks, while their opponents got 21. And overall, the U.S. only ended up holding about 45% of possession in their final 2 games against Japan and the Netherlands.
And I'm going to throw this out to you and Chris Hummer, who is sitting at the mic. And it's just, I was really surprised by this because, first of all, before the tournament, we talked with Charles Boehm, who mentioned the fact that this team had the most professional experience of any U17 World Cup team. But also, you could just go on Twitter and find countless examples in the CONCACAF Championship and the build-up to this World Cup of this U17 side scoring some beautiful goals where the ball started in the back, sweeping moves, and they finished it off. Were you guys as surprised as I was to see them go down in the fashion that they did?
Yes, and at the very least, that was what was so disappointing, is that at the very least, I expected some, kind of fireworks on the offensive side. At least score a few goals and see some flash of what we saw back in May. Obviously it's against lesser competition in the CONCACAF Championship, but to be so bad offensively, they were outscored 8-1 overall, and statistically the U.S. actually was 23rd out of the 24 teams at the World Cup. They were second to last, which is just, in my opinion, completely unacceptable.
Yeah, and Chris, go ahead, but I also want to ask you, the fact of the matter is that they are still 17 years old. We can't lose sight of the fact of that. And even though it was a dismal performance, perhaps there's so much that they can learn from this. Nobody's career is written in stone at the age of 17. And at the same time, in any career, you're going to take steps forward and steps back.
For sure, but there's also a lot of 17-year-olds playing professionally in Europe right now, making a couple $1 million a year. So this was the first team that we had all professionals on the starting roster. And I think it just has that feeling of the United States doesn't get to play regular games against high-class, world-class opponents at all ages when they're here in CONCACAF. And then they go into an event like that, and it's just like the air's let out of the balloon. Was it overconfidence? Is it lack of preparation? Are we too easy to scout against? It's just there are lots of questions for sure.
Well, let's transition over as that's the U17 men's, but Quinn, the U20s and the U17 women, they're getting ready to convene again.
Yeah, they've actually already convened out in Carson, California for a training camp at the U.S. Soccer National Training Center. It's the U20 women's national team has brought 22 players out. 18 out of the 22 are coming from youth clubs, while only 4 are college players. And that's pretty unusual for this age range. Sometimes you have almost all college players at the U20 level, but obviously this camp is coming during the college season. But also head coach Marc Serber is preparing for the upcoming cycle, and they're looking for younger players and identifying some younger players. On the youth side, just to keep an eye out, there are 3 clubs that actually placed 2 players each on this roster. So Eclipse Select out in Chicago, SoCal Blues, and Real Colorado each have 2 players representing the U20s right now.
And at the girls' club level, ECNL is hosting a big showcase, and there's something different this time around than from what we're used to in these gatherings.
Yes, the ECNL is hosting its annual Phoenix Showcase this weekend out in Arizona. That's been going on for a long time, but this year they added in the girls ECNL national selection game, and this is going to be something they're doing at multiple showcases throughout the year. They've done national selection events in the summer just once a year in the past, but they're adding these games now at multiple showcases for U16 and U17 players from around the country who are selected for these very exclusive rosters. And the idea is that these games are going to be played, quote unquote, under the lights. This one's going to be on a Friday night. And, they live stream the games. And the idea is to create a big, bright stage to create a big game atmosphere for the players. And I think that's a great idea, because one of the complaints that, college coaches have and people in general have about travel soccer, DA, ECNL is that, they say, they don't have a big game environment with big crowds and things like that you can actually get at the high school level. But, I think this is a really cool, to see this effort being made to create big game atmospheres.
Yeah, the only thing that bothers me, but I guess when you look at it, you see it at every level. But these girls, while they're in this game under the lights in the National Selection Showcase, are actually going to miss a game, possibly 2, with their team in those showcases. But still, you deal with that at club level, especially in MLS, when you play inside FIFA windows, and you have to deal with it when players are going to college or other things as well. So, something that the girls are going to have to deal with, being away from their club teams, and their club teams respectively are going to have to deal with playing high-level games without them too.
Yeah, and at the very least, it'll be probably some good playing time opportunities for maybe some players who might have been on the bench otherwise at the club level. So, I think it's a good overall addition for the ECNL.
Excellent. Well, we'll definitely keep an eye on the national selection game in the ECNL showcase coming up in Phoenix, Arizona. Quinn Casteel, he's the one getting these stories and more up on SoccerWire. Quinn, excellent work as always.
Thanks, Mark.
Time for a quick word from our sponsor, Player Maker. And when we return, we'll Skype in Charles Boehm, who is on the road covering MLS Cup. The SoccerWire podcast is brought to you by PlayerMaker, the lightweight device worn by soccer players on each foot to record every touch of the ball and every step. Within minutes of training or games, players and coaches get a report on every touch, including left and right foot usage, possessions, passing, and dozens more. PlayerMaker is the most holistic player performance approach that's never been seen before. Visit SoccerWire.com/PlayerMaker to schedule a demo. Welcome back to the weekly SoccerWire podcast. We want to thank everyone who's listened and commented on last week's show and encourage everyone to share, like, and subscribe, as well as reaching out to us on email at news@soccerwire.com with news tips, comments, and your own college commitment news. I'm Marc Serber, and we are joined now by not only a fully healthy, but a traveling Charles Boehm, who is in Toronto to cover TFC's final preparations and will then fly to Seattle for MLS Cup. Charles, have they let you into Canada yet?
Amazingly, here I am. I'm on Canadian soil, and I have not yet been accosted by any Mounties. So far, so good.
Well, I'm not going to ask who you paid off, but Stunna, before we get to anything else, and I really wanted to ask you what it's like to get to cover an MLS Cup, but you said something that made me super depressed last night, and that was that you feel that there's a huge disconnect between the pro and youth game in this country, and especially when it comes to how many young players and parents are actually watching the MLS Cup championship match.
Yeah, I've detected this over the years. I think, and Chris Hummer and I actually, we've probably talked about this for hours when you add up all the years. You know, the soccer community in this country, in terms of people who play the game, care about the game, who are involved in it, or whose kids play it, is a really enormous number of people. But it's so balkanized. There's so little agreement. There's so little collective direction in terms of, who and what kind of teams and leagues all those different soccer people support or even just care about. And I've definitely noticed that while it may have gotten a little better in some places because of the rise of the academy systems and the development of the homegrown system, maybe there's deeper roots to some communities in some parts of the North America and Canada. But in general, there's a lot of people who just don't care about their local professional team or the national professional league. And this can be said about USL as well, I think, the second division. There's just a lot of people that for whom their involvement in the game maybe doesn't extend as far as it does in other cultures. And it's always been interesting to me, and I've wondered whether it's the fault of the league to capture the imagination and the attention of people, or whether it's a symptomatic maybe of a deeper, something missing in our soccer culture. But I'm fascinated by it, and I think it particularly comes out at this time of year with the playoffs being in full swing. This is, some of the most dramatic games, some of the best quality soccer that MLS has to offer. And I often wonder who's watching. Are young players watching? Are their parents watching? Does it connect to them at all? Are they coming across it casually, maybe, or not? And so I wanted to get it out on the show and maybe see if our listeners could kind of advance the discussion some as well.
Well, and I think that's a great segue to what we've planned to talk about today is, if you are going to watch and maybe you don't watch soccer regularly, or, your attention span, if you're like me, it doesn't last 5 seconds, but, for a full 90-minute game, or, if you're just not sure kind of like how to watch the game, I think, the questions that I was going to ask you before we get into what it's like to be on the scene at Toronto FC's final preparations and then what it will be like to cover an MLS Cup. But, for those players and parents that maybe haven't even thought about watching this weekend, and for coaches as well, let's get into what some advice we can give. Well, starting with players, what's some advice that we can give to players about how to watch a game, let alone how to watch the MLS's showpiece event?
No, I think this is critical for players of all ages, and unfortunately, again, there's a little bit of a tradition, I think, in our culture to let those aspects of the game, playing and watching, get detached from one another. I know I've talked to a lot of college scouts on both the boys and girls sides who encounter players who might be recruiting, and they'll say, so who's your favorite club? Do you have a European team you watch, or do you have games that you like to watch or players you like to watch? And they'll say, well, no, I just play. I don't really watch soccer. I just play soccer. I mean, this was a surprisingly common answer, even among like elite players, in elite leagues and clubs in the teenage years. And I think you miss out on so much of the experience, not just there's a simple joy of consuming the game that way, but also, the role models, the smaller subtleties to the game that players need to work at, and they can do so with role models, I think, so much more quickly. And I think it's a really important part of the sort of maturation of our soccer culture, is that ability to watch a higher level game. And it doesn't always have to be professional. I mean, for some people, it's easier to go watch their local college team, maybe, or it can be a lower division pro team. It could be, although I think there's no substitute for firsthand experiences, I think you can also get a lot from watching leagues abroad on Saturday and Sunday mornings too. But what are the people who've gotten to where I want to go doing? How are they solving the challenges that I face in my matches? I think this is a really important part of the development process.
Yeah, and I think, some of the advice that you could give to players who are going to tune in but want to know what to look for, one of the best pieces of advice I was given, and it's certainly a little bit harder on TV because the cameras follow the ball, but I've been told, hey, in my day, like I was, when I wasn't left bench, I was a left winger. And so I was told, hey, you're a left winger in the old school 4-4-2 system. Just watch the left winger for 90 minutes, because the bottom line is even the top players, your Messis and whatnot, only have the ball for 5% of the game. So watch that player, watch his movement. What does he do off the ball? What does he do on offense? What does he do on defense? What do you see that maybe you'd want to implement in your game? Is there any other kind of tips that we could give to young players as to how to watch it with a certain amount of interest and curiosity?
I think we, people of our generation too, don't take for granted that the access we have to high quality soccer, and even with a basic television subscription or even without cable. When you look at how hard it was for me growing up as a teenager and as an adolescent to try and find games, I was fiddling with the rabbit ears. Growing up in Texas to get Mexican League games, or we would share videos from German Bundesliga highlight videos or World Cup compilation videos. Like this stuff was like these precious commodities, almost like contraband. And again, I think it's an element that modern players, they just have no excuse for. I mean, honestly, maybe there's some cases where you don't have a family member who's sort of leading you to that and helps train you. And for some people, it's just harder to consume the game that way when it's indirect. But once you reach a certain level, and I think in your career where you want to improve and you take responsibility for your own development, you've got to find other players who you can learn from, you can steal from, right? I mean, idea thief. This is something Pep Guardiola has talked about over the years. That it's not just about coming up with new stuff. It's about stealing the best of what's out there, taking what you can from those who are performing at a high level. So I'd love to have a conversation, whether it's online, on Twitter, or in the comment section, or encourage listeners to get at us with how they address this, because I know it's a new challenge maybe has come along in the last few years with the device culture and how difficult it can be to keep kids focused. Totally understand that that's probably a challenge as well. And with a 5-year-old of my own at home, I noticed that too. But I think we've got to try and collectively emphasize this culture of study, this culture of sort of watching and learning and reflecting on those who we can learn from.
All right, so I'm going to say this right now. If you are a coach or a parent or somebody who just wants to get involved in the conversation, we want you to tweet at the SoccerWire and tell us what is the best way to watch a game, how do you watch a game, and what are the takeaways that you try and get from the games you watch. So if you go to at the SoccerWire, tweet us and let us know, and we will definitely go ahead and share those out. Charles, thank you so much for your time. I know that you are somewhere in the bowels of the Toronto FC facility doing this with us, so we really appreciate it. Before we let you go, really quick, because we're running pretty deep into this segment, I just want to know, first of all, what are you covering at the moment in Toronto? And how are you feeling about the fact that you get to go from Toronto to Seattle, watch this game with over 69,000 people? And then on top of that, as a journalist who is covering the championship live, how do you watch the match from a journalist perspective? I've thrown a lot at you there, and you have to throw it back to me within less than a minute, or less time than it took me to ask this question. Go.
Well, I'll say this: I'm hugely honored in this media landscape. It's so rare to get to travel, for big games and to be on site. And there's just no substitute for that. And it's a real blessing. I'm lucky that MLSsoccer.com has sent me here to Toronto to try and capture a little bit of the atmosphere around Toronto as they get ready to play the Seattle Sounders. This is the third MLS Cup final matchup between these two teams in the last 4 years. It's two really quality teams, quality organizations who are model organizations in the way they do many things, not just the first team, but their facilities, their the front office, their academy. These are really two well-run organizations, and it shows in the consistent success they've had. And there's some really great sort of personal plot lines to follow here as well. One of the things, for example, that's been on occupying the headlines around Toronto FC is Michael Bradley, who's well known to both U.S. and Canadian audiences. The reports are that if he wins, he's entering an option year. This is the last year, guaranteed year of his contract right now. But if Toronto FC wins this MLS Cup final on Sunday, his contract option automatically renews at his current wage level, which is the second highest salary in the league. So he doesn't want to talk about it this week. His club doesn't want to talk about it. They're all focused on the task at hand. But it's really a fascinating situation to have this player who's been instrumental in changing the culture here in Toronto and has been such a high quality player for such a long time at club and international level. And now he's got his own fate in his own hands. It's an amazing aspect. And it's just one of many fun subplots to track as we lead up to Sunday at CenturyLink Field.
Well, Charles, I don't know if you know this, but the good news is that if we get at least 100 listeners, then it triggers our $6.5 million option from SoccerWire. So we're hoping for those downloads here. Charles, thank you so much for your time. We wish you all the best in Toronto, that they let you back into the U.S., and that you enjoy your time in Seattle.
This is going to be the first show where we use a laugh track, I think, because you dropped a good one there.
Oh, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much again. And not only do we now know what the storylines are to look out for, but also great insight from Charles Boehm on the culture of the game in America and how it's viewed by youngsters. Charles, thank you so much once again, and we really appreciate your time and safe travels. We hope they let you back into the U.S. So we're going to step aside and let's see what Player Maker has to say. The SoccerWire podcast is brought to you by Player Maker, the ultimate performance product for soccer teams and players. Player Maker is already being used by the world's top Premier League clubs, championship college teams, and now available for the youth market on a subscription basis. The Player Maker system records every touch of the ball and every step, providing information for coaches and players such as total touches on the ball, right and left foot touches, possession times, distance covered, sprints, and passing completion, among many others. Player Maker data can help coaches at every level to plan their training sessions effectively. Every player receives feedback on their personal technical and physical training goals. For a demo of Player Maker, visit soccerwire.com/playermaker. Player Maker, fast track player development. Welcome back to the SoccerWire podcast. Marc Serber alongside Quinn Casteel, Chris Hummer, and producer Bridget Baker for a roundtable discussion about a topic that has been dominating youth soccer and much of the country this fall. State Cups. Have they lost their luster since the advent of the Development Academy and leagues like the ECNL? Are these really the best teams in the state? Chris Hummer, you're the founder of all this. We're going to start with you.
The founder of State Cups? I'm not that old. No.
You're not?
Yeah, no.
Okay, just checking. Yeah.
They
there goes that bonus.
Yeah, right. No, the State Cups are depends on your perspective. You know, to paint the whole issue, because people in youth soccer live in their silos. They live in the world they know. You know, there's lots of Division 6 lower league people, you know, teams that win championships, and they treat it like they won the World Cup, as they should, because that's the world that they know. So, since the advent of the Development Academy 10 years ago, and also simultaneous with U.S. club soccer becoming a major platform for a governing body in the United States, you know, the State Cup, as we all know the word from history, is a U.S. youth soccer organization. And it was the 55 state associations would compete State Cups. They put all their teams in, and back in the day, it was all of the teams at the travel level, and they would go up into their own championships, and then they would play regionals, and then they would get to go to nationals, and that's where you'd get your national championship. And that's the way it was forever. And since the DA started, those teams immediately pulled a bunch of players out of that. So now the teams got diluted. U.S. club soccer started sanctioning their own leagues. The biggest movement of that was the ECNL girls, which is now what, the 9th year, getting close to that. So
11th, I believe.
Wow.
For
Okay,
girls.
so the DA, the boys DA is now more like 12 or 13. It is definitely longer than ECNL. So that pulled all those teams out of there, and so yes, the State Cups, the teams that are winning State Cup now, it's very easy to say, and it's unfortunate, and it's not taking anything away from them, but they are not the best quote unquote teams in their state.
Quinn?
Yeah, I think that's been, you know, unfortunately, obviously true now for some time. Like Chris said, the State Cup, which is, you know, U.S. youth soccer's State Cup competitions that have been around for decades now. It seems like each year that goes by, you can add, you know, a team or two in almost every age group within the respective states that are objectively better than the so-called State Cup champion. And at this point, it's, you know, pretty hard to ignore.
And so how should we think about things when we look at stuff like Got Soccer or Youth Soccer's ranking system?
Well, you could do a whole show on that and come up with 8 ways to try and end the Got Soccer's influence. If you look on SoccerWire.com, I've written about it at least twice, about how I think that the obsession with rankings, specifically Got Soccer's ranking system, is a proprietary, somewhat non-scientific algorithm that favors teams that play in tournaments that Got Soccer's software manages. So that's a whole nother issue. But there was nothing else. There is nothing else necessarily. More recently, there's a new platform that has been crawling the internet that looks at all of the scores pretty well. And if you talk to coaches in the States that are very familiar with the entire landscape, it does a much better job. I think Youth Soccer Rankings.us, I believe, and it's actually was purchased by Sports Engine. So those of you that know the youth soccer world know them. So it's now an NBC product, basically, ultimately. But all you have to do is look at that. We did a quick little cross-check. Quinn, do you have those numbers with you?
Yeah, the website is youthsoccerrankings.us. And we did just today, following this past weekend, the Virginia State Cup finals happened for the 15U through 19U age groups, boys and girls. And just looking at a few of the age groups, we're looking at what are the closest thing to a true ranking system, because unlike Got Soccer, youthsoccerrankings.us accounts for ECNL and DA teams. So basically you're looking at, in these older age groups specifically, the State Cup winners from this past weekend are anywhere in the, number 7. Some of them are in the number 7, anywhere between 7 and 12 in their state, in their age group, when you account for DA and ECNL teams.
So let me throw in my opinion, because, hey, I'm the host of the show and I can jump in. But the bottom line is...
Turn off his mic.
So, look, rankings have always been arbitrary. I mean, think about all the different arguments we've had about the top 25, whether it be in NCAA, soccer, or basketball, or football, no matter how scientific they get, no matter how many times they try and revamp the system to make it more accurate, as soon as a team's not undefeated, all of a sudden, where do they deserve to be? And so for me, I obviously State Cup has lost its luster, and that's fine, but I still think that it's a huge achievement. But I think that the bottom line is if you play DA, that's great. If you play in this system where you have an opportunity at State Cup and you get a chance to win it, that's great as well. But because that's the path you're on and that's where you are. I think that you have the NCAA, they have their national champion. Then you have the NJCAA, they have their national champion. And then you have the NAIA, that also has a national champion. And so I think it's okay to have different champions within those different silos because you're all working towards different things. DA players looking to go pro. Club players, some of them want to go to college. Some of them have an opportunity to go pro. But at the same time, it's hard for us older folk because we all grew up at a time when State Cup was the best team. But I think the club game for me is just like the pro game. Yes, it's very diluted. There are so many different leagues, but I think the more places players have a chance to play and be on the path that they want to be on, the better. So if this particular State Cup is diluted, so what? And we don't need to have some Champions League just to put on a label on who is the exact best team in the U14 age group.
Those are all good points, Mark.
Well, I believe before the show you called it a straw argument, but go on, Quinn.
Well, you went a little bit deeper there, but no, I think it reminded me. I wanted to rein in kind of, I think, and just be a little more specific about what I mentioned before, because, like you said, I don't want to rain on the parade of the State Cup. Especially because with so many different, people call it alphabet soup in youth soccer nowadays with U.S. club soccer, U.S. youth soccer, all these various regional leagues and affiliations all over the country. All across the country, everything is so fractal that in one state or one region, the U.S. Youth Soccer State Cup might still be a true state championship where they really are the best teams in that state. Another state, that might be the case for their U.S. club soccer side and the NPL. Or up in the Northeast region and the Mid-Atlantic here, we have EDP, we have the CCL, the Club Champions League. And so there's so many different, specific clubs, and regionally it's just case by case, whereas which states and which regions happen to put their best teams in a particular league or are affiliated with a particular organization like U.S. Youth Soccer or U.S. Club Soccer. So it's very fractal.
Yeah, and of course, look, there's always going to be that argument as well, is that, the best teams in youth soccer could probably beat some of the development academy teams, just like some of the best Division III teams.
There's no probably about it. There's a lot of DA and ECNL teams in every state that would get whooped by State Cup champions. It just so happens that the best
But you could say the same thing about Division III teams with some of the worst Division I teams in NCAA as well. So that kind of is always going to exist. But Chris, to take this kind of one step further out of State Cup, I mean, the advent of the DA especially, and then ECNL has also diluted ODP, hasn't it?
Yeah, that gets into the player development conversation about how the year after DA started, ODP on the boys' side basically went away as the primary identifier or gatherer of the best talent in the United States. Whereas before that, the way that you got seen by the national teams was through the ODP program. So, yeah, that certainly has diluted that talent. So, I wanted to sort of add on it, the whole pay-to-play model is also at play with this thing. As we add other national championships, we have DA national championships, we have ECNL national championships, we have U.S. Youth Soccer national championships, we have NPL Premier League national championships. You've now got each age group, if you've got 8 to 16 or even 32 teams traveling to a national championship event times 4 leagues, now you've quadrupled the number of teams, which means the number of players and parents that are spending money to fly to go be quote unquote national championship. So we'll get into this in other episodes. We've been talking a lot about, everybody can't be elite, and this use of the word elite. No, nothing against somebody using it in their brand like ECNL, but everybody's got elite in their tagline. You can't all be elite. It's like, which is it? So it's certainly diluted the ability to get all the best talent in one place, which is what ODP used to be.
So my question though is, like, in a age where we talk about youth development as developing players, providing them the right platform, providing them the best space to grow up as good young men and women, using the game of soccer to teach them life lessons that they can carry on through so many different aspects of their life moving forward. Why do we even need a winner? Why do we need to say that this person is the best? Why can't we just say that, hey, this person is in this path and this league, and they are fighting to be the very best in this organization?
Why
do we need
Can I give you my cynical answer?
To say, who is this number one team?
Money. I mean, these events have been nationally branded. As you have this alphabet soup of governing bodies and leagues, it's a competition for which one can attract the best players, which means the most college scholarships, which means the clubs get to brag that they're members of these associations, or the more clubs that get to say we have a national championship, the more players they can attract to our organization. It's turned youth sports, this whole pay-to-play thing we all complain about, and it's turned youth sports into a big sports business marketing episode. Again, none of what we're saying, to be very clear, is taking anything away from Johnny Goalscorer from Saturday that won the state cup. It is whatever competition you enter at whatever quote unquote level you play in, winning your games and becoming a champion does what soccer's supposed to do for young people. Is it makes them better young people. They get to overcome adversity. They get to learn what it's like to win. That's all good. It's just it does turn the stomach a little bit and give you a little bit of that uh-oh feeling when everybody tries to make their national championship like the World Series.
Well, it's kind of the open market, though. Quinn Casteel, you get the final word.
Yeah, Chris pretty much took the words right out of my mouth there with all these national championships.
I get the final word.
I was just thinking back to what just every summer. I won't name them by name, but you see so many, a lot of press releases coming into SoccerWire with teams that are saying, "Oh, we're national champions," and a listing of national champions from, take your pick at the events that happen in July every year. And in many cases, the quote unquote national champion might be anywhere between the, 100th and 200th, if not even lower than that, best team in the country in that age group if you take every single team into account.
Well, I mean, this is one of those conversations that we can continue into other shows, as this is a topic that I feel is going to rumble on for years and years here in the U.S. youth soccer landscape. One more break, and when we return, I'll be joined by Bridget Baker to tell us about this week's college commitments. SoccerWire is the place for prospective recruits to list themselves and promote their profile to thousands of daily readers, including college coaches, scouts, and more. All recruits can list themselves for life for a small one-time fee. Already committed? Congratulations! All commitments can be reported for free and are included in our nationwide soccer recruiting and tournament wire to over 65,000 people each Thursday. Visit SoccerWire.com to create your player profile today. Welcome back to the weekly. Do we mention we're weekly? We're weekly. SoccerWire podcast. I'm joined now by producer Bridget Baker, who is here to tell us about the most up-to-date college commitments.
Wait, she's not back yet because Tottenham just scored.
Well, that's true. But don't worry, Bridget, it's going to be overturned by VAR.
You guys killed my outro. I was going to say, come on, you Spurs. It was going to be fun.
Well, you can still do that, you know. They're
Yeah.
just not going to be up by a goal.
Well, we'll see by the time I get done reading these. Hopefully, they're still up.
Yeah, they'll have given up 2 goals by then, but go ahead.
That would be peak. So a lot of commitments this week with National Signing Day coming up next week on the 13th. We're going to start off with the 2020 class. Defender Jenna Troffler from the Houston Dash Youth Soccer Academy off to Georgetown. Defender Rachel Schaefer from IMG Academy will be heading to Colgate.
Woo, Patriot League.
Another IMG Academy product. Forward Emily Mangia will be headed to Houston. Sophia Roberts, Peoria FC United, is a defender who's going to Monmouth College, while midfielder Stella Downing from Vancouver Whitecaps will be off to Memphis. Another IMG Academy product, Anna Clark, is a midfielder heading to Loyola, Maryland, while Jody Brown, a forward for Montverde Academy, will be going to Florida State. Bo Rubenstein, again, IMG Academy, forward and midfielder heading to SMU. And then off to USC is another IMG Academy product, midfielder Helena Sampaio. And last for the 2020 class is defender Grace Claire Athas from North Carolina Youth off to Gardner Webb. All right, for the class of 2021, Bailey DeSmit, a midfielder forward for Pipeline FC, will be heading to Loyola, Maryland.
Shout out to Sean Rush, the owner of Pipeline, does a tremendous job alongside Santino Caranta.
Sophie Maltese, a forward from McLean Youth Soccer, will be headed to Virginia Tech. Defender Marissa McClure for the St. James FC Virginia is committing to the College of William and Mary. Another IMG Academy product, Kendra McKee, is off to Virginia, and she is a defender and midfielder. Forward Abigail Lynch from FC Pride will be going to Illinois, while Lauren Hatt, a midfielder from Penn Fusion, is off to St. Joseph's. Jesse Dunn, a defender for Charlotte Soccer Academy, is off to Clemson, and off to Eastern Kentucky is Carmen Combs from Lexington FC.
Thank you, Bridget. And congratulations to everyone who is not only taking the next step in their soccer careers, but their academic ones as well. We're rooting for you, and with National Signing Day coming up, we want to again remind you that all commitments can be reported for free to us at SoccerWire.com/recruiting. I'm joined once again by SoccerWire founder Chris Hummer, and everyone is going to jump into this one as Chris gives us his Heard on the Wire.
Thanks, Mark. Love doing this segment. It's a nice opportunity for us to just throw some stuff in there that might not have been the core news that we've already talked about or had a guest booked for.
Yeah, but why are you inviting Quinn and Bridget?
Hey.
Fair question.
So I have 3 today. We're gonna get a little bit deeper the roundtable. The last one is might just take all the air out of the room and make everybody very upset. But
Can't wait.
Yeah, right. So this is going to be, and this is we're going to try and do this new sort of format for the podcast a little bit, where we're going to pick a good theme that we're going to know for the following week, and we're going to talk about it just a little bit on each episode in the current week. So we have some time to get some reader feedback, get some some questions answered, get some opinions and that sort of thing. So one of the things that we're going to do next week, since it'll be recording on the same day, is the opening of the National Letter of Intent season. So Wednesday, November 13th, will be the first day that college recruits are going to be able to start signing their commitments in what's known as the NLI letter. So that's just the small thing to talk about today is, what is the NLI? How important is it in the process? And the quick take on that is for those that don't know, players that are receiving scholarship money get an offer from the school in writing that has all of their academic or their financial aid packages presented to them, and they sign an actual letter accepting those terms, and that commits them for a full academic year to that institution. They have to show up there and play, or they have to show up there at least. They could go back on the playing part, but they have to show up, and they may not play for another school if they go at least to get scholarship. So for those of you that don't know, an NLI letter is basically when the schools that want to make an academic offer, a scholarship offer to a student, they do it in writing, and it has all the terms of their money basically outlined. And if they sign that letter, they have 7 days to sign it from the time it's presented to them. Once they sign it, they're committing to that school. And they may not play someplace else if they decide to not take that money and go to a different school for that year. So it's a contractual situation. Now, in soccer, it's not that big of a deal in a sense of how the marketplace takes it. In basketball and football, it's like NLI Day is like huge. It's on ESPN and all the top stuff. In soccer, it hasn't traditionally been that much pomp and circumstance surrounding it. And it's become more of a ceremonial day. And so I don't think, and you guys can chime in, but it's opening here November 13th next week. I don't think we're going to have the whole flood of social media and all the photos coming in and all these signing ceremonies, because that usually happens, in February at the end, which is like the deadline to be signing to make those final commitments.
Yeah, at the same time, though, right? Like, obviously, the soccer doesn't get on ESPN or the other major sporting outlets, but with Twitter and Photoshop and Facebook and all that stuff, even those with the fewest amount of resources can still get that out there pretty quickly. So it's not going to have the same pomp and circumstance like you said, but I do think that in the soccer world and those of us who are tuned into it perhaps way more than we should be, we're going to see that pretty much right away. Maybe not on that actual day, but even from the smallest schools to the smallest colleges that players are going to, I think you'll see that by the next day at the latest.
Oh, no, there will be plenty on that day. There were last year with the girls when they had their signing day early in November. They were rolling in just like it was any other signing day. Like Chris mentioned, it's usually in the winter in February. They've moved it up to November as far as the early signing period beginning. And there will be a lot, the clubs like to make a big deal out of it, and the individual players, like you said, on social media. So there will be a lot of news rolling in, no doubt, next Wednesday.
Yeah, and for everyone that is submitting that, congratulations. And we encourage you to submit that to us at SoccerWire.com/recruiting and tag us on Twitter, on Instagram, wherever you're putting that posts out, so we can join you in celebrating your achievement.
Definitely. I mean, thanks to guys for chiming in there. I wasn't trying to downplay its importance from a soccer perspective. I was just expecting the deadline day in February to be much more than it might be this year, like next Wednesday. But it's certainly one of the things the NLI does is, especially in the girls' side, because the competition is so high, there's so many scholarships compared to the boys overall. By the time if you amplify the number of scholarships they get to the number of programs that there are. So it's just a lot more possibility. So once you sign it, it is like you're off. Like they're not allowed to be recruited anymore. So it's kind of like if you've ever been in deep debt, and you declare bankruptcy, your creditors can't call you anymore. So the coaches get to stop calling you.
Well, that's great. Once again, like Bridget said, congratulations to everyone who's signing a national letter of intent from all of us here at SoccerWire. Moving on, Chris, you have some news regarding our official sponsor for this podcast, PlayerMaker.
Yeah, well, it's the reason there are sponsors. It's we've had a strategic partnership with them. We created a strategic partnership with PlayerMaker, and they've been able. Part of that partnership is we give them advertising, but they are giving us a lot of data that we can use. We can't identify the teams, but they're giving us data that we can use to spark coaching conversations. And I'm not going to go into the PlayerMaker contents here about all that it does, but in really briefly, it's a device that you wear in both your left and your right foot that measures the vibrations of the ball touching. It measures the angle of your foot, and so it knows if you've received the ball, passed the ball, dribbled the ball, and these sorts of things. And one of the coolest things that it does that you've never been able to do before without analysts looking at video and making all kinds of crazy statistics for every player is that it knows when you've used your right or your left leg to interact with the ball. So what we've done is there's an original piece out on SoccerWire.com right now. As the time this podcast is published, it'll be going up Wednesday night, that looks at some early data that we have from them on left and right foot usage. And it's what's really interesting about it is, just to summarize, is they gave us data from, they have teams in the top levels in the UK using it in training. They're not using it in games yet in the Premier League or the Championship, but they have teams using it in training. They have we have a U16 category of a couple of academies, Premier League, Championship academy, youth academies over there, And then we also compared that, and this is boys, by the way, all men. And we've also have data from a couple of top-level United States-based NCAA men's teams. And looking at training sessions, and all of these, they had at least 20 training sessions involved. And the right foot usage at the Premier League, at the top professional level, is 57% right to 43% left. And you go to U16 academy level in the UK, and they're using their right 65% of the time and only 35% left. And you go to the NCAA level here in the United States, and they're using their right 68% of the time, 32% left. Not a huge difference, but it's still different. So you take that in training and you move on to the article. It talks about on the girls' side here in the United States only, because they don't have a professional academies in the UK using on the girls' side, using women's side. And we took at the U14 development academy level here in games. This is games, not training. The girls are using their right foot 72% of the time compared to 28% left. And in the NCAA Division I level, again, a couple of top programs are wearing these in their games, 71% right, 29% left. So basically no difference. So the article doesn't conclude anything, but it certainly, the data is showing that there is basically no development in the United States between the age of 14 or 15 up to the collegiate level in improving a player's balance of use of right and left foot.
And I can't tell you, nothing irks me more when I am watching a professional game, even a college game, especially the top teams in the NCAA, and there's a player who has a chance to shoot the ball with their left foot, and they pass it up just because they're not comfortable enough to shoot it. And I see that Premier League, La Liga, everywhere. Whenever I see it, it just drives me crazy. But Chris, I'm looking at these show notes, and it says, bad coach of the week is better than you suck, you're not going back in. What are we about to get into here?
Well, you just summarized my entire third point of the Heard on the Wire this week is this. I didn't really hear this on the wire. I heard this in person this week. So I won't talk about clubs and age groups and everything else, but especially the younger ages, especially when winning is not supposed to matter, travel, and this team was winning 4 or 5-0. And the quote-unquote bad player on the team, the worst player on the team, isn't getting playing time. Coach puts her in. She runs around for like a minute and a half, makes a mistake, subs her off, puts her on the bench. She's the only player on the bench, so there's no other players to hear this, but I heard it. Looks her in the eye and says, "You suck, you're not going back in." She did put her back in about 5 minutes later for a minute and then took her out again. So again, not going to talk about it. It happens. Coaches lose their temper and stuff. But in general, I can guarantee you that's probably not the only place in the country that happens every Saturday, and it drives me nuts because that's not what the game is supposed to be about.
It's not just coaches; it's parents too. Some of the things that they say to the referees, to players on the other team, to players in their own team, their own kids. It just befuddles me. And so I think that that's something that we're definitely going to address going into the next few shows is, well, like we said, one of the big things is we want to find solutions here. So we're not just going to sit there and talk about how endemic it is or how terrible it is or all the instances we've heard. We are going to look for ways that parents can look at the game differently and think about how they comport themselves on the sideline. So stay tuned to the SoccerWire podcast to see that coming up in the next few episodes. But that will do it. The time has come to end this week's edition of the SoccerWire podcast. For coverage of everything youth soccer, be sure to check SoccerWire.com, your premier location for the best coverage of the youth game. If there's something we missed or a topic you would like discussed, hit us up on Twitter @TheSoccerWire or hop over to SoccerWire.com and click on the Contact Us link on the bottom of any page. Every Thursday we put out our national soccer recruiting and tournament wire, and for those of you in the Mid-Atlantic or Tri-State regions, we send twice weekly local news roundups. Just click on the newsletter link on SoccerWire.com to get the best of SoccerWire right in your inbox. For Quinn Casteel, Charles Boehm, Chris Hummer, and our wonderful producer, Bridget Baker, I'm Marc Serber saying thank you for joining us on the SoccerWire podcast.